Welcome to Backroom Talk.
Are chatting about energy systems experimentation and what we went through over the last week or so.
Gosh, that thing was, it was icky.
It was so icky.
Yeah.
Why did we do that?
We actually push aerobic threshold the entire time. That shit is brutal.
Let's not ever do that again.
Yeah, unless the people ask.
Don't ask for it, guys.
Just
Please
kidding.
don't.
To listen to more Backroom Talk, be sure to subscribe. Learn to design personalized programs with the OPEX system of coaching by heading to opexfit.com.
Welcome to another episode of Backroom Talk, guys. We are chatting about energy systems experimentation and what we went through over the last week or so. This is part 2 of a 2-series podcast episode. So if you didn't watch last week's and you want to hear our prep, our working ourselves up for what was to come, then go back and listen to that one or watch that one. But otherwise, let's get into the recap and talking through the 5 energy systems assessments that we hit. Before we talk about that, though, guys, these podcast episodes are related to a free guide we just put out that has some really awesome videos, some people that are far more impressive than we are for the most part.
Speak for yourself. I don't know.
Going through these tests too. Carl and then James as well do some commentary over the top, so they're super fun. We'll drop a link in the description below if you want to go and sign yourself up for that free guide if you haven't already. But let's get to it, Carl. Let's start with assessment 1, which was peak watts on the assault bike.
Yeah, it's my favorite one. It's quick, it's easy, and before you know it, it's done. That sounded like a weird story.
That did. I don't know if those are good or bad things.
I don't know.
Probably
in this
bad.
case, it's good. In
Quick
this
and
case,
easy?
it's good. Not in this case. This case, it's really good. Trust me.
Okay.
But no, it's good. Yeah. I intended on doing this on Friday. I intended to do it on Friday, but we hit the row kettlebell swing burpee lactic repeat on Thursday, and I had no oomph on Friday, so I decided to not do it on Friday. Pushed it to Saturday. Got 2,007 watts, so lower than what I thought I would get.
Yeah, I pushed it back until the last possible minute, which was this morning. Lactic repeat, we'll get to what happened with lactic repeat, but I just, between the other pieces we had to do and just some other training that I really wanted to hit, I didn't want to put my training on hold for a week of assessment, which, maybe I should have. I'm not sure, but I really wanted to lift some weights too. We'll see. I put it off until this morning, and the mistake I made with that was yesterday was a double day for me. I did a bunch of aerobic work in the morning, jiu-jitsu at night, got home late, had a shorter sleep, so was not feeling super fresh when I went to hit that this morning. Definitely not fully recovered, and Wednesdays are supposed to be my off day. So
you Georgia just broke guys, don't do what Georgia just talked.
Don't
do
execute it in the way that I did. But no, I definitely just again had no oomph going into that one. I got 1075 watts, which was low. I've definitely revved that thing a little higher in the past. But yeah, I was just damn tired.
What's your best score on that?
I think something like 1,300-ish.
Ooh, that's a big drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like we talked about last week, if
Yeah.
you were using this as a check-in on readiness, right, that would have told you something.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need to do it because today's an off day, you had a double day yesterday, so you're probably expecting a number like that anyway coming in based on how you were feeling.
Yeah, I was not expecting to see record numbers today, but yeah, definitely good insight that Wednesday needs to be a rest day.
Yeah, I came in, like I said, at 2007. My best is a little under 2,200, but I don't think it was readiness for me. I think I'm just less powerful than I used to be. So I think it was a fairly accurate measure, and it actually took me 3 sets to get there.
Yep.
So my first set, I went 1,900. My second set, I went 1,950. And then the next set, that's when I hit 2007. And I knew in my head, I can't get any more. I can't get any faster than that. So I shut it down. And I went on the Assault Bike Pro,
Yeah, I did too.
I did in my garage. So, let's see, we haven't used that thing that much, right? So maybe wattage is a little bit different. Maybe it's a little bit harder to accumulate power on that thing. So
Yeah,
we have to take that into consideration.
for sure. It definitely feels like a little bit heavier being on there than the regular assault bike. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, it feels, it's weird. I think it's smoother. It's smoother and heavier
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't feel like drag. I don't feel like the drag is
janky.
increased. Yeah. I don't feel the jankiness or the drag of like an Echo bike. So it's the experience doesn't change. It just feels, it's just more of a robust piece of equipment. So for me, it feels smoother. But keep in mind, they're brand new bikes, so they're gonna feel really smooth out of the box. But so far, I like it. Yeah, it feels a little bit heavier, but I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, we'll have to play with that. Maybe do the regular assault bike and the assault bike pro side by side, and see if there's a big difference.
Yep.
How does that make you feel being a little less powerful, Carl? And I don't ask that to be a dickhead. I'm just
No, it's
I'm
good.
curious.
No, it's good. I mean, if I had to like rate myself on like training qualities or physical capabilities, power would be one that I would rate lower than where it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's due to a lot of different things. The way that I train now, I'm getting older. I know I don't look like it. I don't look like I'm 55, but I'm 55 now. I'm just kidding. I'm not 55.
OPEX is really aged.
People are like super confused. They're like, what the hell? No, but I'm getting older and I'm just training differently.
Yeah.
So, it's actually a good thing for me that I have less power. I feel better. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Yeah, it's just the way that I've been training and getting older.
Yeah.
So I feel good about it, Georgia.
Good.
Thanks for asking.
I'm glad. Again, I wasn't like asking it
No, I know.
to make you feel bad. I think it's important
No.
reflection on just how those numbers change, not just from session to session in terms of readiness, but over the years as, we age, as training changes and we go through different goals and priorities. So just not having, an emotional attachment to a number being high just because, and remembering that number always exists in context of who you are on a certain day in this, grand old thing we call life.
Yeah, we were on a cohort call yesterday, and Emma videoed the assessment stuff, and I was showing that on the cohort call, and I did get a couple compliments that my butt looked really good. It looked big and good. So even though it doesn't have as much power, it's still there. The horsepower is still there. It's just not showing in the assault bike.
Ugh.
I just wanted to point out that my butt's looking good right now.
What CCP coaches were trying to pay you off to
It actually
get passes on their
started with who we would expect, Brandon Wilton. So it started with him, and then there was a couple others. Like, I thought I was the only one that noticed that. I was blushing. Felt good.
Oh, keep the compliments coming in.
All those banded glute bridges.
That's it. Yeah, that's all you do in the gym,
That's
right?
it. That's all I do.
Donkey kicks, hip abductions, and banded glute bridges.
That's all I do.
It's well-rounded program design.
Well-rounded program design for a well-rounded behind.
Love it. That's the name.
That's
the name of our new template.
It's our new training program.
Yeah, I don't think I have any other reflections on my gain test, my assault bike test. I don't know that it's like really all that relevant to my training and what I do to know what that number is. It was interesting again to see it low based on readiness, but is it something I'm going to test consistently? Maybe just for fun, because it's like fun to get on that bike and crank it hard, but I don't really care what my max power is at this point in my life.
Yeah, for people that are testing it on themselves or on your clients, just understand that context is key, right? It's like, when we say what are good and bad scores, it's like, it kind of depends on who your client is, but just understand why the number is what it is. So if it's a very low number relative to their body weight, and we say like the 8 to 10 times body weight is pretty good. If it's a low number relative to their body weight, just understand why. Like, what are their resistance numbers? And if those are low as well, it gives you like affirmation of like, okay, they're just weak, right? So I need to focus on strength. Or if it's like your case and it's like you test this thing over and over and over again and you notice like a 200 watt droppage, think about what they did the day prior and what they're doing in that training session or what you've been doing in their training cycle in the weeks prior.
Would you use it as like some kind of an indication for, potentially someone needing a deload, or little bit of a pullback for training?
Yeah, right there on the spot.
Yeah.
Not globally though,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's when we start to look at fatigue is just very complex and complicated. But right there on the spot, it's a very good indicator of how tired someone is right there on the spot. So I think it is a really good like direct assessment to say, okay, now we're going to do this because of that, but I wouldn't like change a training program around, or I wouldn't like, put someone into like a 2-week deload because of that one number. But if you're testing this thing like, religiously on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you have like all of this data and you notice, over 3 weeks, you're seeing this, that's going, maybe, yeah, they may need to go into a deload, but think about what you've been doing in training as well and how they feel. Ask them questions as well.
All right, cool. Anything else to say on gain?
Nope.
Peak watts?
Nope.
All right, let's get to pain. Let's get to the fun stuff. So our cyclical test was 60 seconds max cal on the assault bike. I did that about...
Let's start with row kettlebell swing burpee.
Oh, I don't want to remember
Just
that
because it'll
one.
make more sense when we get to the cyclical.
True, as to why
Yeah.
we did what we did on
Yeah.
the cyclical one.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. So row kettlebell swing burpee, quick recap for those that haven't watched part 1. If you haven't, go back to part 1. But 3 sets, 250-meter row, 15 kettlebell swings, 25 burpees, 15 kettlebell swings, 250-meter row, rest 12 minutes, 3 times through.
Yep, 70-53 for the weight and American kettlebell.
Yeah.
Why are they called American
I
kettlebell
don't
swings?
understand it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, maybe let's save that for a different conversation.
Yeah.
But they're American kettlebell swings, so that means all the way overhead. It's probably because it's not a very smart movement.
It's so stupid.
It's kind of dumb. So the Russians were like, "Oh, those are fucking American kettlebell swings.
you
Those
guys-
are not Russian
You
kettlebell
can have
swings."
them. You guys have them. No, it's like, yeah, you kind of hit the point where the power's dropped. You're just going to pull it over your head some more because you can.
Yep.
'Cause why not?
I am pro-America, guys. Sorry. I don't want someone to get offended by that. They're like,
No.
he hates America.
Just not American kettlebell swings, especially in the context of the lactic repeat test.
Yeah.
So we rolled into OPEX HQ last Thursday to do that one together. Bit of moral support, make sure we, have each other's backs, cheer each other on, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
I think you went first, Carl. You, you stepped up to the plate and said, I'm going to go for it. So talk us through your times.
Yeah, my times were as expected. I think I actually nailed these. I think I said like upper 3s. I'd dip into the 4s. So I went 345, 359, 415. So very similar to Trevor's actually.
Yeah.
I just beat him. But yeah, very similar to Trevor's.
How much of a percentage drop off is that between them? Do you know what like, the rough math is in your head?
Yeah, it was, gosh, I want to say 5 to 6%.
Yeah. And that's like kind of where you want it to be, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolute scores weren't great though, right? So, anytime we look at degradation, we have to look at what the output was. So I wouldn't look at those scores and be like perfect, right? Because I'd be like, if I cared to like do really well on that test, I'd be like, okay, I don't even care what the degradation is because I have to get my absolute scores lower. So I would just focus on getting my absolute scores lower. The first set is like 320 to 330, then I'm starting to think about what is my degradation. But if I'm going 6 minutes, 6:30, 7 minutes, I'm not going to like high five myself because it's a 5% drop off because absolute scores are so high.
Sure. Well, I first round was 440. I got it under 5 minutes. Wasn't sure if I was going to or not, but I did. It really hurt. Those 12 minutes of rest just flew by. Round 2 was an absolute shit show. So yeah.
Emma's behind the camera with her hands over her face right now. You guys can't see that, but Emma was in the gym and she couldn't look. She's like, "What are you guys doing to yourselves?"
Emma's like our mom, so concerned that we're gonna hurt ourselves with our stupid, risky behavior.
Emma's like, "This is not your ideal version of fitness."
No, and it wasn't. It wasn't, guys. The second set of kettlebell swings, I think I got 14 reps.
It was
and
14.
I was like, shit, I got to do one more. I put the kettlebell down. I don't know why. I should have just done the damn thing, but it was really heavy
Guys,
in
by
that
put
moment.
the kettlebell down, she means she literally floated it from overhead and there's a massive hole in the ground that goes down like 16 meters.
There is not.
Because she floated the kettlebell.
No damage was caused to the floor. I watched back the video because I felt really bad, and I did bring it down like below my shoulders before I dropped it. Still a long way to drop
it. It sounded like she threw it to a wall ball target and just let it fall.
But that was on 15. That was my last rep. I don't know why I stopped, but I was like, I just can't do this anymore. Had to pick the kettlebell up, but like psyched myself out. Like that kettlebell felt like it was 300 pounds in that moment.
A 1 rep max kettlebell swing.
That's how it felt. It really did, Carl. And you're like, I remember you yelling, like, use your hips, like, you know, hinge at the hips, because it was all quads, but I just couldn't make myself. Like my body did not want to bend over. It was like, nope, you're not doing that. I got my 15th after like psyching myself out for like 15 seconds or so. But that second effort was 5:33, I think. So a huge drop off from set 1 to set 2. That's like 53 seconds slower. I don't know what percentage it is, but way more than 5 to 6%.
Yeah, it's like that was in the critical drop off realm.
It definitely was.
Yeah.
Went to do my third set, like on the rower, 10 seconds before I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to do this thing. I'm going to have to fraction my kettlebell swing so I don't leave a hole in the floor. And Carl was like, you know, you don't have to do it. You can stop. And I thought you were just riling me up and trying to get a reaction from me.
No, I wasn't.
But I didn't do it. I did not finish that one, left the third set out. The only thing I would have gotten out of doing that third set was suffering and saying that I finished it. It's obvious that I cannot use lactate and buffer it for my system from that drop off from 1 to 2, and set number 3 wouldn't have told us anything differently, right?
Yeah, I think it's a good learning opportunity though, right? It's like if you're coaching someone on the floor out there and you saw that, what would you do?
Absolutely tell them to stop.
You would say stop, right? So yeah, I mean, when you start to see, like when we have a test, let's use this test because we're talking about it, but we have this lactic repeat test, and the intention of this test is to go as hard as possible and to get the best time possible every single set. Once you see someone is not capable of going hard anymore, right? And hard is relative, right? But once you see that they have to fraction things, put it down, and they're really suffering to a point where they can hurt themselves, you got to just wrap it up. Like, just stop. You're not going to get anything from that. It's like, what would your third set have been? Probably 6 minutes, right? It's like, what would that have told us? We would have had this conversation, and you'd be like, I just didn't have it in me, so I just had to finish. That was the only thing that was in my head. I just have to finish it, fraction it. And it's like, okay, so we didn't really test what we intended on testing, but you had to finish it because it was on the board, right? It's like, that would just be a stupid thing to do. So I think we have to look at that and be okay with pivoting what the plan was with ourselves and our clients. It's like, just because it's written down doesn't mean that we have to do it. You know what I mean? Like, if you see critical drop off, stop, because nothing good is going to come from that. You already assessed what you needed to assess, weren't able to recover and do it again. There's no reason to do it for another set or 2.
Yeah, and I think it really speaks to the value of having a coach in that moment. Like, you're not my coach, Carl, but you are a coach, and you're a coach that I respect a lot. If I were in that gym by myself, I probably would have just done it really slowly, gotten nothing out of it, just to say, I did it, even though I know better, right? We know better as coaches. We still do stupid things sometimes. But having you there to say, you know, it's okay, you don't have to do it. You're not going to get anything from doing it. Stop.
Yeah.
I was like, fine, I'll stop, you know?
Yeah, it was like a 10-second conversation that like did this real quick. It was like, you don't have to do it. And you're like, oh, no, I'm good. It's like, Georgia, don't do it. You're not doing it. It's not happening. So it happened like, it was 10 seconds, but it escalated very quickly. I thought me saying you didn't have to do it, you would just like be like, okay, cool, like, good idea, let me step off. But she was strapping in still. She's like, oh, no. I'm gonna just like, hey, Georgia, like, you're not doing it. Stop doing this.
No, well, that's because when someone challenges me to do something, that's when I want to do it. Like, that's how I respond. So
wasn't a challenge.
I've got that now. I definitely got that now, but that will always be my first reaction in those moments.
Gosh, that thing was, that was icky.
It was so icky.
Yeah.
Why did we do that?
Yeah, like, you know, I finished and it hurt, right? Like, if I were to say what was my effort level, I would put it at 95%. I didn't go 100%. And it's not because I, intentionally wanted to sandbag, or like I just didn't want to, right? Like I didn't have, not that I didn't want to, I couldn't, right? I just couldn't go 100% because I didn't want to enough, I think, right? So, once you start getting into that realm of like any type of strategy happening, you're not attacking the test properly, right? Like when I first started rowing, I was at like 132, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold 132 instead of saying like, let me push the limits a little bit, get this thing sub 130, and then kind of catch my bearings as I transition from this to the kettlebell. Kettlebell swings, got to the kettlebell, went as fast as I could. I didn't fraction, couldn't have gone any faster on those. Got to the burpees. My first set, my burpee tempo was, let's call it at 90%. Then finished at the same like 132 on the rower. Second set, like everything just started getting a little bit slower, right? I was like at 135 now on the rower. Kettlebell swing was the same cadence. Burpee went from 90% to 85%, and I saw that in time. That's where I lost time, really, was the burpee, as well as the 6 seconds on the rower overall. And then the third set, I didn't attack it like, okay, this is the last set, I have to go 100%. I attacked it like, I'm just going to hang. I'm going to survive this, right? Like, I'm not going to be on the floor for an hour after this thing. So I didn't attack it at 100%. And the reason being is because it wasn't, like, worth it to me. You know what I mean? Because I know how that feels. And I think my body automatically, or my mind automatically, was like, you're not going to push it to this point. And even going at that 95%, like, it was tough. Like, it hurt. Like, I didn't sandbag it, but it hurt. And immediately realized, like, why the fuck did I ever do this to myself? Like, really, like, I had those thoughts. Even that day I had those thoughts. I was like, it's not worth it, right? It's not worth it. I get it. Like, when I used to compete and I used to do it to win, right? Like, it made sense to me. But now where it's like, yeah, that's just like, fitness is so far away from that for me right now, to get put in that scenario and to do that reaffirms like what I need to be doing in the gym and what I do not need to be doing in the gym. Because I told you, I think that evening, like, I felt like I lost years off of my life that day. Like, legit, like, just the way I felt throughout the day. I had like this thing in my chest, and I felt foggy, and like I just wasn't as productive that day. So that made me like, we know that, right? Like, we know, doing pain work isn't good, isn't healthy, but I hadn't done that type of work in so long, where I kind of became numb to what it felt like to just to have it in my face and to like feel the effects for the rest of the day. I was like, this is just stupid. This is really, really stupid. So I think it just reaffirmed the idea that was already baked inside of my mind of like, yeah, no one needs to do this work unless they're getting paid for it. That's it. Like, not even the old me of like, I want to do this to win. It's like, you better be getting paid for this, right? Because it's making you less healthy. If you're a male, it's taking testosterone away from you. It's likely lowering the amount of years that you're going to live. So it's like, you better be getting something out of this. And if it's just like happiness, like, maybe that's cool for some people, but in my mind, it's like, you better be making a living doing this thing. This thing better be paying you. You better not just be doing this for fun.
Totally. I mean, I felt like on the floor, I was thinking to myself about all the things I wasn't going to do at the level I wanted to do them throughout that day and for probably the couple days after, because of doing that, right? Like, it just takes away from so many other areas, your ability to be sharp at work. I wanted to go to jiu-jitsu that evening, and I had a terrible time there because I felt so rubbish from that morning. I think I said to you, like, it feels like this day has been going on forever when I saw you that evening. Yeah. Like, just weird, like, time warp, brain foggy kind of day, digestion, like, just a little bit off. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever do that again.
I don't think I will either.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, there might be something that happens, and I'm like, I go down that road again, but I don't think so. Yeah, wasn't enjoyable for me at all.
No.
Yeah, I'll stick to my intense work will be intense aerobic work that I feel good after, about 30 minutes after. But yeah, that was a bit much. Yeah, that was a bit much.
Definitely. Well, how did that influence your decision going into the cyclical pain test, which was a 60 seconds max cows?
It made me say, fuck that, I'm not doing it. Yeah, I decided not to do it, just for that reason. I just look back at, the way that it made me feel and the way that my week was set up and things I had to get done. And it was just like, no, I'm good. I think it'd be beneficial for me to jump on and talk about why I decided to not do it. So I don't feel like by me not doing it, let anyone down or anything like that. No one was really looking forward to that. But for me, it was just like, yeah, just do the responsible thing and just pass on it, because that's a test that would mess me up more than lactic repeat, actually. And that's a test that I've gone I've pushed like 60 calories on that in 60 seconds and has ruined me. I know we talked about it last week, but it like ruined like days on end how I felt. So I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I did it this morning right after doing my peak watts. In part, I was like, I know I'm tired, so it's not going to be a great effort anyway. And also, my power is just like so much lower than yours, Carl. I knew it will probably make me feel like not great for 30 minutes after. I had like a little bit of a headache afterwards, just felt a little off. I feel completely fine now just because I think I got 26 cals in the minute. Just not that great an effort. And because of that, it didn't mess me up too much.
Why'd you do it?
Just because I said I was going to.
Okay.
I was curious,
All right.
we talked about it and I knew the consequences would not be that bad.
Yeah. We did talk about that.
And yeah, I didn't think that there was going to be any like massive negative outcome. If it was another piece like the lactic repeats where it was an endurance effort, you had to do it multiple times. I could have dropped a kettlebell on my head. I would have said no for sure. But the 60 seconds on the assault bike was fine. It was like 15 seconds. I'd done peak watts right before, so I couldn't push myself to where I went for peak watts. It was not all out from the start. I think I started around 900 watts or something for the first 15 seconds. I think my body held me back a little bit, knowing it was going to be 60 seconds and knowing what I could do for, that kind of 10, 12 seconds on the peak watts. 15 seconds around that 900 mark, 15 to 30 started to drop, starting to feel really uncomfortable. And the last 25 seconds was such a slog. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, just felt like I was pedaling through cement. Could not have done anything more at the end there.
What was the limiter physically?
It just couldn't go. It wasn't my legs, it wasn't my lungs or anything like that. I just literally had no strength in my body left. I had nothing to give. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit. But usually when we start to feel that, like that going through mud feeling, usually it's a combination of our bodies feeling like they can't get blood out of the periphery, right? So was it did you feel anything local in your legs or arms, or was it just you just stopped?
I just stopped.
Okay.
After I did, I got off the bike, laid down, quads locked up right after. But in those last 25 seconds or so, I just felt like I had nothing.
Yeah.
Just nothing to put in the bike. It doesn't matter what you told me. I wouldn't have been able to do anything more.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some nervous system stuff happening there. Because if it was a physical limitation, you would have felt it, right? You would have felt, the legs feeling like they're this big and they were just going to explode, and the lungs feeling like they're going to come out of your chest. But yeah, I mean, maybe because you didn't push to the wattage you would have pushed otherwise if you were fresh, maybe you couldn't get there, but it was your nervous system holding you back and just essentially telling you hey, I just can't do this anymore. But that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm tired. Like I said, I'm tired today as well, so highly likely that is the case.
Yeah.
And I've been there before and I don't want to go there again.
So realistically,
based on last week.
Yeah, you're probably under the hood, you're probably older than me right now as we sit here.
I'm an old soul, Carl.
Just saying.
Doesn't surprise me.
Physiologically, George is 45.
Didn't you get told that you had the most healthy and pliable muscles of anyone ever? Something like that.
I did,
right?
yeah. Yeah, a massage therapist told me that. It was 2 weeks ago. I was like, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And that massage, no, I won't even get into that.
Sounds like there's going to be another story. But
Yeah,
there's not.
there's another side to the story, but there's not another story.
No, nothing.
Nothing happened
suspicious.
with that massage therapist. That went nowhere.
Okay, let's move on from pain, because I really just want to like leave that whole experience behind and not dwell on it anymore. I think it's safe to say that neither of us are going to be assessing or doing any pain training in the near future.
Yeah, but that's why we want coaches to experience it. Imagine if we never experienced how that
True.
felt, and we saw shit on Instagram of people doing really hard work, and we were coaches and we gave that to our clients because we saw it. So that's why it's really important to understand what this stuff feels like. Because if you know that your client doesn't have any competitive aspirations and you think about doing row kettlebell swing burpee with them, you're going to think about how that felt, and you're going to be like, fuck no. Like, there's no reason I would take that person through that. You know what I mean? But if you don't know how that feels, you might just be like, okay, let me type that in. You know what I mean? So it's important to understand how it feels, not just the principles around why to do it and why not to do it.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to understand for coaches watching.
Yeah, definitely. If you haven't done 60-second assault bike and you're thinking about giving it to one of your clients, go do that right now. Pause the YouTube.
You do it yourself. Don't give it to your clients.
Yes.
It sounded like you were telling them to do it.
No, don't.
George is like, if you're thinking about giving it to your clients, go do that.
Go do the test yourself.
Yes.
Let's move on to something that makes me like feel way better about life. 5K row.
Yeah.
So a cyclical aerobic test. I think we both did this on. Did we both do it on Friday? I did it on Friday.
I did it on Friday. I did it the day after.
Lactic repeat.
Yep.
Probably not ideal in practice, like going back to back.
No, we should have definitely, if we wanted output to be at 100% and not 98%, we should have just completely rested the next day, maybe done some MAP 10 stuff, easy aerobic work, walks, stuff like that, maybe some blood flow. But yeah, best practice, don't do that after a tough bout like we experienced on Thursday.
Yeah, but again, like life, I didn't want my life to stop to do these damn assessments, and I knew I wanted to go and roll on Saturday, so I couldn't do it on Saturday. So
yeah, and I knew I was
Friday.
I knew I was going to approach the 5K at like an incremental, let's call it 90% all the way up to 95%, and never push aerobic threshold. And that's not because I wanted to sandbag it. I just knew that was the way that I wanted to approach this test, to get like a little bit of a feel around where I sat. Because when we do 5Ks, like row, run, whatever it is, and we actually push aerobic threshold the entire time, that shit is brutal, right? Like even in testing, we have to be very specific when we test stuff like this with our clients as well, because we want to tell them the intention on why we're testing it. There's a difference in, I want to know your maximum potential in this test versus I just want to understand where you're at-ish, right? So instead of just saying 5K time trial, you have to give some context behind that, because pushing aerobic threshold for 18 to 25 minutes, wherever your client sits, that's an experience, right? Like all the stuff that we just talked about with lactic repeats, very similar when we push aerobic threshold for that amount of time. Just as tough to recover from that stuff. Not good, not healthy. So just because it's an aerobic test doesn't mean that it's a healthy test for everyone to do at capacity. So for context, that's why I wanted to do, a 90 to 95%, just to get an idea of where I sat. Could I knock off a couple seconds? Of course, but I didn't want to.
Yeah. So what were your splits roughly, and what was your end time?
End time was 1856. Yeah, 1856. So, pace number. So what I did was I increased pace every 5 minutes. So I started at, I don't even remember what my pace was when I started. It was like 150, I want to say like 152, 153 or something like that. And then I just took a couple seconds off every 5 minutes. And then usually the way I would approach these types of tests is like the last 2 minutes-ish, I would just like go. Just like close my eyes and go and hope that I don't run out of juice before 30 seconds comes. But I didn't do it that way. I kind of just incrementally inside of that last 2 minutes picked up pace. So it was like every 30 seconds I like took away time per 500 meters, 1 second per 500 meters. And then I ended, and it was like, that was like, if I approached it and I want to push aerobic threshold the entire time, I could have probably came in at just under 1850, but not much better. Like I wouldn't have been like 1845 or under. So that was very close to what my capabilities are right now.
Yeah, I went incremental as well, like very similar approach there. I think every 1,000 meters I got a little bit faster. I finished at 22:09, which was PR for me, which is nice. I haven't tested it in a couple of years, 5K row, but it was better than last time. I started at my like previous 5K time, knowing that I felt like I was going to be a little bit better. I just feel more aerobic than I did at that point in my life. I'm doing a lot more aerobic training. So I think I started around 2:15, held that super comfortably for the first 1,000 meters, took a couple seconds off for the 4,000 meters after that. The last 1,000 meter block, every 250 meters, I went like a little hotter, and just sent it on the last 250. But it felt good. Like I really didn't, my butt was a little sore, 5K row, but I actually enjoyed the process. It felt like a bit of a game and an experiment, taking an incremental approach like that. I felt like I was learning something about myself throughout those 22 minutes, and finished at the end. Took a couple minutes to kind of catch my breath and spun on the bike for 15 minutes, but felt good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I always like to look at longer tests like this, because I would say relatively this test is longer based on what a lot of people do. I'd put it in like 3 categories, where it's like 3 categories in how to improve this test. So category number 1 would be just volume. Like you have the avatar that just needs to spend more time on the rower, and their 5K will get better. Then you have avatar number 2, which you have to look at comfortability, where it's like they just have to be a little bit more comfortable going a little bit faster on the rower. So that's when we start to look at that like typical, we split them into quarters, and we do race pace stuff, and we don't even have to increase race pace. We just make them more comfortable somewhere around their race pace. And like, let's say avatar number 1 comes in at 25 minutes on their first 5K. Just give them more volume and they'll get better. Avatar number 2 comes in at like 20 to 23 minutes. And it's like, they just need to get comfortable at their race pace. And then you start to get your sub 20 avatars, and those avatars fall into that intensity bucket that I would put them in, where it's like, they need to get comfortable way under their race pace to actually get better. Because we talked about it a little bit earlier in the week. When we start getting into people that have like 16, 17, 18 minute 5Ks, that's just moving, right? And then we talked about 16 minutes. It's like very few people in the world can do a 16-minute 5K, right? Like that is unbelievable for someone to be able to hold on for that. So that person, you wouldn't give them just like a bunch of volume on the rower and expect them to get better at the 5K. So just, I think if people could just understand that framework a little bit and understand where their clients sit inside of that, I think that'll create a lot of clarity on how do you get someone's 5K better? Because we hear that question all the time. It's like, how do I improve 5K? Do I do the quarter method and go at race pace for everyone? And it's like, well, yeah, that would work for everyone except for like your 16 minuter, but maybe they just need more time on the rower. So I think we get too cute and too specific with people that have like 26-minute 5Ks. It's like, just row every Thursday with that person and retest it in 4 weeks and they'll get better. So I think that's just for context and like where this test is beneficial and not, and all of that. I think that could help some people.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all that different to thinking about resistance training for people who are beginners to more advanced, mm-hmm. and what people need on the front end with good full body resistance, exposure to all the movement patterns on a regular basis, versus what they need when they become more advanced. Yep. They need more specific work. They're going to need to go through accumulation, intensification, and just change it up a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. With the 5K row, I had a question. I'm completely blanking on what it was going to be, Carl. What was I going to ask you?
Probably something around why my score was
why
so
it was
good.
so fast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
how are you
that must have been. Oh, here's what it was. So for that 16-minute person, are you talking like tougher aerobic work, or are you talking like actually doing some anaerobic training on the rower with them?
The 16. Yeah, some anaerobic stuff, right? Because they're pushing threshold. Like their aerobic threshold is so much higher and so much physiologically demanding than the 22-minuters, where it's like, they're gonna have to push into that anaerobic training, and they have to understand how to fight through that stuff, because there's very little for that person, because they're so good. That is like there's a lot of anaerobic characteristics that's happening inside of their system when they're going through that test, versus someone that's 22 and they're like, I'm gonna approach this incrementally and I'm gonna walk away and feel good after it. It's like that person that's coming in sub 16 isn't approaching it that way.
No, I would much prefer the approach.
Yeah, that person's heart is like this and it never stops.
Well,
right?
Let's hope they're getting paid for that 5K or something.
Man, there's some impressive. If you're bored and you want to look at like world record, just watching like world record 2Ks, 5Ks, that stuff is crazy. You look at like, people in functional fitness and like what they would deem as, really good scores in 2 and 5Ks, and these people, like these professional rowers, just put them to shame. You're just like, how is it possible to hold a 118 on a rower for 60 minutes? Like, there's people that can do that. It's crazy. It's astounding.
I remember always being super impressed. We'd have this guy who regularly dropped in at my old CrossFit gym. He was German, and he'd come to visit. I can't remember if it was like for work or what, but he was a pro rower or former pro rower. And just looking at him on the rower versus every single other person in that gym, even the fittest people in the gym, it was like night and day. No competition.
Not even close. That's like, I keep talking about Tom Brady. It's like Tom Brady coming in here and like me thinking like, I have a pretty good arm. And then like Tom Brady coming next to me and throwing the football. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, man. I get it. Yeah.
All right, last test, our 18-minute AMRAP. So mixed modal, sustained pace, 18 minutes, as many rounds as possible of 15 box jump step down, 12 shoulder to overhead at 115.75, and then 9 toes to bar. How'd you go? 363. So 10 plus 3. 267. So 7 plus 15.
Yeah, this one, that was a good one.
Yeah,
it was a good one. This is one that I used to be a lot better at. I used to always be easily 11 plus rounds on this, but not this week.
How come?
Not this week.
Why are you less good?
Well,
another of those questions.
I'm more refined, not less good. I'm more well-rounded now.
Okay.
No, I'm less good because we mentioned it when we did it on Sunday with James, but I haven't done a lot of shoulder to overhead in those scenarios with a barbell. Like I do a lot of like kettlebell, dumbbell stuff, and with inside of like aerobic pieces, but not a lot of shoulder to overhead with a barbell. And when I started, I knew it right away. Like warming up for it, just like getting loose, I was like, yeah, it feels really good. It's light. It's 115. But when you start to add up the reps, right? What was it? 120 reps that I did. Yeah, it added up really quick. And, after round like 2 or 3, I was just like, okay, I need to I fractioned them the same across the entire test, but the time that I took from going to the barbell from the box jumps and then going back to the barbell after rep 6, because I went 6 across, that time just did this over the length of the test. And yeah, it was just limitations in shoulder overhead. Toe to bar, I could have gone unbroken for many more sets. Box jump step downs, I could have done a lot more reps. It was just the shoulder overhead.
Yeah, my toe to bar suck. Is the reality.
Whoa. They have room for improvement.
They do have room for improvement, but they have improved since I last worked on toe to bar in a mixed modal setting. I've been going through skill progression for them, just isolated every Saturday. Nice little EMOM of toes to bar, building volume over the last however many weeks, and I think it's paid off. Felt a lot more comfortable. in that environment, doing it with the shoulder to overhead and the box jump. So it really does speak to the merit of working on skills in isolation before you try and put them in a mixed modal setting. But I really wasn't confident yet. You know, I wasn't ready to test them. I need to spend some time now putting them together with other movements, putting them together with breathing, because in that setting, I was like, when my heart rate gets up or my shoulders get a little fatigued, are they going to fall apart? Like I really didn't know. So I took quite a slow and easy approach going in, steady on the box jumps. I think like 8 and 4 on the shoulder to overhead because I didn't know how that was going to affect the toe to bar. 6 and 3 every single set on the toe to bar. And that felt fine. I was able to sustain it throughout. My rounds got a little faster towards the end as I realized I was okay. I wasn't going to fall apart, but I just didn't have confidence going in, so I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, you did well. Your toe to bar were a lot better than we had a piece a couple months ago where your toe to bar just totally fell apart.
We did that chipper.
The bottleneck
chipper, right?
Yeah, I like how you drew it with your hands.
It's what it is, right?
I was like, yeah, I know what that is.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah, they got a lot better. This is 12.3, CrossFit Open 12.3, same test. I've been saying that it was push press, but it's not in 12.3. They labeled it a push press, but it was a shoulder to overhead. You could do a push jerk. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they called it push press.
Confusing, guys.
So, sorry, I misspoke last week. I don't even think you guys watched this last week.
Look at that side eye.
But this is an interesting test. Like, imagine if we were doing the Open, tomorrow, right? It kicks off tomorrow. Imagine if we were doing the Open tomorrow and we just had the feedback that we just gave each other. We wouldn't be ready for it, right? So this is a great test to take clients through, like months ago, right? Like 2 months ago, take your client through this and see what the limitations are, because this is just such classic CrossFit where it's like something like this will likely pop up again, right? Especially this year with limited equipment. So yeah, this is a test that gives great insight into, you know, how fit someone is, how capable are they of making these very simple movements, aerobic across a longer period of time. 18 minutes, like we talked about, it doesn't go by like that, right? Like 18 minutes is a long time for constant contraction. If there was a 15-calorie row somewhere in there, 18 minutes would fly by because you have that opportunity to like, okay, catch your breath, you know, compose. But when it's contraction all the way for 18 minutes, like you can't hide from it. You can hide from it for maybe half that time, but once you get over 10 minutes for most people, you're like, okay, now I'm feeling something here. So yeah, take your clients through this and ask them questions, ask them what the limitations were, and fix those limitations if they're athletes and they're doing the Open.
Yeah, I thought it was enjoyable. I mean, it really doesn't connect to what I need to do in training, but I really enjoy mixed modal training. I think it's fun. I've enjoyed working on toe to bar. It's just been entertaining for me and something to progress. So I'll probably do that again in 6 months or so once I've built some more volume in mixed settings of toe to bar and see if there's any changes.
Yeah, I didn't think it was enjoyable because I wasn't good. Yeah, so if I was prepared for it, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But I didn't feel like I was prepared for that volume of shoulder overhead. And I think a good assessment for people that write their own training program is, would you put that into your Saturday session? And for me, I'd be like, oh, fuck no. Yeah, I'd put like either something in there as like a cyclical piece to break it up, or I would go like single arm on the dumbbell shoulder overhead or something like that. But I wouldn't put that into my Saturday session. So I probably won't like work on it to get better, because I don't want to get better at shoulder overhead using barbells and that kind of setting. But I think if I was ready for that one movement and had built the volume and felt comfortable with it, I would have really enjoyed. Like historically, I love that test. This was the first time I've ever done it where I was like, ugh, I did not like that at all. And it was because I felt like I had no flow, right?
Yeah.
So just don't like doing things I'm not good at.
That's fair enough. I knew I wasn't going to be great at it, but I was excited to see what came of it. You know, I was excited for the feedback that I get from the numbers and from the experience.
Yep.
and I got something out of it. So I'm glad we did that one.
What did James go?
I think he got me 1 round, so like 8 plus something.
Okay.
I think. Sorry if that's wrong, James.
Okay.
Does that sound right to you?
I think so. Yeah, I think that is right. Yeah, because I thought he was 1 round behind me, but he was 2. Because we talked about it after. Because I was like, did you miscount? Because I thought you were just like right on my tail on that. Like I lapped him once, but I don't think I lapped him twice. But yeah, guess I did.
There we go. Gotta just sneak that one in there.
No,
lapped you twice, James.
No, I thought I don't like. We don't have video, but if we could look back at the video, I think he did better than he thought he did on that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yep.
All right. So those were our 5 energy systems assessments. Anything you want to reflect on in closing to feel complete and wrap up your experience?
A wave of emotions. No. Yeah, for me, throughout the last week, I've also been doing resistance FMEs as well. So we started on that Saturday with the bench press, or that Sunday with the bench press, and then I did a bunch of FMEs, resistance FMEs during this time just to kind of check in on those and see where I was at. But it was good. It was, it made me realize a lot of things, right? Specifically, it confirmed why I do what I do in my own training, and it confirmed why I don't do what I don't do in my own training. No pivots, nothing that I'm going to change based on that. It's just it was good. It was good to check in. I probably won't check in on a couple of those ever again, but it was good to check in.
Is there any energy systems assessments that you have that are like your go-tos that come up regularly in your own training? By regularly, I mean, every year maybe.
Actually, no. And the reason is because it's just not a part of what I do, right? It's like I'm not connected to getting better really at anything specifically, more just feeling better and having really good rhythm and enjoying what I'm doing in training and ensuring that I'm giving myself things that I'm capable of. But like gun to my head, I would say that one test that I absolutely love is constant variance, and we did that a couple weeks ago with me, you, and James. That's one test that I'll sprinkle in probably once a year. I did it 2 years ago. Just did it now. I just really enjoy that test.
Just for fun, or is there any insight it gives you that you enjoy?
Yeah, it gives me a lot of insight because the way that my training has been over the past couple of years is very similar to that, right? Like very, very low in intensity, very high turnover. I do a decent amount of mixed map work just because I really enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy, the contractions inside of it. I do a lot less resistance training these days, but it's essentially a reflection of what my training looks like. So for me, it's a good check-in just to see, like, are you getting worse? You know what I mean? Because if I'm doing like all of this mixed map work and I'm getting worse at that test because of what my training looks like, I'd have to look back at it like, oh, okay, why am I getting worse at that? Is it the movements inside of that? It's like, no, because I regularly do all of those movements inside of that test. Is it the map type, right? So in that 3 to 4 minute range, it's like, for me now, and when we tested it, I was like training in that range. So it was like a perfect time for me to test that. If I was in like map 9 or map 8, it's like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have done as well because my gears aren't as like refined there. I would have done okay still, right? Because I've done a lot of that type of work in the past, but I would have probably taken like 3 to 5 seconds off of every set. So back to your question, probably just that one regularly, and then cyclically I'd do the 10-minute assault bike test because that's a good test of emotional and physical resilience as well as just aerobic power on the assault bike.
Yeah, of course that one is featured over the years many times for me as well. I don't really have a go-to right now, and I'm kind of thinking about that, especially as I have the intention of getting back into competing for BJJ over the coming years whenever there are competitions to compete at again, tournaments coming back to Phoenix, and like figuring out what are the assessments or KPIs that are actually going to be relevant for that? And I don't know the answer to that.
There is no answer to it. You'll have different camps that have their thing, right? But their thing has to be looking at what's the one test or the few tests that can give us the greatest amount of insights into your aerobic ability physiologically, not, in constant variance, not on a rower, not on a bike, but like, what's the best test? And historically, we've always gone back to VO2 max as like the thing, right? And then we talk about, okay, how are you testing VO2 max? Are you running? Are you on a rower? Are you on a bike? So there is no one thing. I would just look at, for you, and understanding where energy systems need to be in BJJ, you always have to look at where your pitfalls on the mat, right? If you notice that you're not good somewhere on the mat, how can you take that characteristic and like put it into the gym, train it and test it, and to understand like when this one test gets better, that feeling goes away. That's what athletes have to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like we can't get so connected to, these energy systems tests on their own, in a bucket over here, because a lot of the time they don't directly translate to this thing on the mat or on the field. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, I think, right? For like field sports and let's just call it like athletes and other things outside of fitness, and how we can take some of our ideas and sprinkle them in over there. But the reality is you just have to see what works, right? Like what gets rid of that feeling of like, I'm not that good when it comes to this, right? Like when I'm 90 seconds in and I'm rolling and I have like this feeling in my chest I don't like how do I get fitter to avoid that?
Yeah, it's not getting fitter right now for me. It's technique for
Yeah.
sure. It's the
Yeah.
reality, blue belt.
Mm-hmm.
Not that far into my BJJ journey relative to how far into my fitness journey I am.
Yeah.
And it's never aerobic ability or strength that goes. It's always technique.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where time needs to be spent.
There's your answer. You don't need an energy system test for BJJ.
No, probably not.
No, yeah, you really don't. I think we want to create one because we're fitness coaches, but the reality is we don't need it.
Yeah. All right. So wrapping up, when coaches are thinking about energy system assessment and what they should be putting in place for their clients, what they're going to take from these 5 assessments or, from the fitness monitoring exercises that are inside of CCP, how do they decide what the right one is?
Yeah, I think it always does go back to what are you trying to assess specifically? And I know I just kind of like sprinkled it in there a little bit, but are you trying to test someone's work capacity specifically? If you're trying to test their work capacity, understand why you're trying to test their work capacity. And if you have a why, usually it's because they're competing in something or they're getting ready to compete in something. So make that energy systems test the thing that they're going to compete in, or as close as possible to the thing they're going to compete in. So that's if it's work capacity. If it's, mental or physical resilience when it comes to when the going gets tough, it's like keep it really simple. Use something like the 10-minute assault bike. And that's why we love that. Like that thing shows so many things. But I think a lot of coaches look at the 10-minute assault bike and they say, okay, I'm going to use this test to test just work capacity. And they don't see the other things that are happening. For instance, let's say we're standing on the gym floor right now and I'm like, hey, Georgia, we're now going to test 10 minutes max calories on the assault bike.
No.
And I would start to look at like your reaction to that. So it's like, okay, in my brain, I just assessed her want to do hard work and it's not there, right? So, okay, how does that connect to the program design? I'm not going to push her over the ledge very often because I know that's not what she wants. She does it. I'm like, hey, Georgia, but this is a part of the thing. It's like the OPEX methodology. You got to do it. She's like, okay, she does it. She gets on there and she's like sandbagging it, right? It's like, okay, I'm like reaffirming my thought initially that she doesn't enjoy this. She doesn't want to do it. She's just doing it to do it. Versus if you really went after that thing, you finished. And then when you finished, you're like that, you're on the ground and you're like, that was awesome. In my head, I'm like, she enjoys being challenged physically, right? Like metabolically, versus you're on the ground. You're like, I'm never doing that again. Like us after the lactic repeats,
Yep.
I'd be like, okay, maybe I don't need to push her, aerobically or anaerobically, anything like that, because it's not connected to her goals and she doesn't enjoy it. And then, so that's like the emotional stuff. And then on the physical side, it's like, what's the difference between how you attack it? What happens at the 7.5 minute mark when your legs are burning and your lungs are like coming out of your chest? It's like, how do you respond to that? Do you drop 5 RPM and finish sustainably to survive? Or do you try to hold it? RPE is going up, RPM is staying the same, and you're just like fighting through that thing, right? Like that tells us a lot about someone. So understand what you're trying to assess and use an appropriate test to assess it. But for a lot of people, we don't have to get too fancy. And that's why I'm just going to say, just use the 10-minute assault bike, and you can get a lot of data from that outside of just how many calories they put out and what their average RPM was.
Yeah, so it's not just the numbers that matter in assessing energy systems. It's also making sure where possible you're with your client in that moment, or at least you're getting a really great video of it so you can see what's going on in their face and everything else that happens during that 10 minutes.
Yeah, and when we start talking about, assessing energy systems for general population people, right, it's like the most powerful assessment is, or the most powerful way to look at it, in my opinion, is human beings should be able to do work. Like that's it. Like humans should be able to do work, whether that's going out and jogging for 10 seconds and walking for 30 for an hour, hiking up a mountain, taking their children to Disneyland and being able to walk around all day. Like that's all work. So understanding if your client is able to even do work is it's beneficial. It's very beneficial. And we talked about this yesterday on our call, but on our cohort call, but I was telling some stories about like, early days in doing the 10-minute assault bike test with like general population people, and how surprised I was when I'd get, a 35-year-old over-fat male that would come in, and, I understood like, hey, this guy doesn't have a ton of experience, but anyone can ride a bike. And he gets on the assault bike and he's holding like 35 RPM, and we get 5 minutes in and I'm like, it's like Z1, like he's not really doing anything, but I'm not gonna say anything. Like, let me just let him finish this thing. We get 5 minutes in and he has to get off the bike because he has to go throw up. Right? So it's like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that before, but that just tells you that's a great assessment of that human being can't do work. And like we have to, I'm going to focus on that, right? Like I'm going to do aerobic work with this person because I want them to be able to get on a bike and spin for 10 minutes. Who gives a shit how many calories they're outputting? I just want them to be able to move for 10 minutes. So that was a very valuable learning back then, where I was like, okay, it's important just to get this guy to be able to do 10 minutes on the bike. That's it. I don't care what his output is. So just understanding that it's not always about work capacity. Sometimes it's about just doing work.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it for
leave it
energy
there.
systems assessments.
Leave it there.
Let's not ever do that again.
Yeah, unless the people ask.
Don't ask for it, guys.
Just
Please
kidding.
don't.
Just kidding. I wouldn't do it.
Guys, as always, if you are on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. And if you're listening on audio, please make sure you subscribe also and leave us a comment to let us know what you thought.
All that stuff. All that good stuff.
All the things.
Subscribe below.
Yeah.
Click like. Comment.
Engage with
Unless
us.
it's negative, don't comment. We don't want to hear that.
And last quick thing, I'm dropping the link to that guide in the description below.
Awesome. Thank you.